Can I persuade you to take a sandwich with you, sir? I'll get drive-through. Did someone say drive-through? Welcome to 5 Points of Articulation, where I review action figures and then articulate 5 points to help you decide if you want to add that figure to your collection. The 5 points I discuss are packaging, presentation, posability, playability, and price. I'm Jason, and if you enjoy my content, please like, share, subscribe, do all the YouTube rigmarole. Today we're taking a look at the all-new McFarlane Toys Page Puncher's Injustice 2 Batman. Starting off with the packaging, and McFarlane's made some changes since the last time we looked at a Page Puncher's. The character name is much bigger and bolder, and instead of a sticker, which no doubt cost a few extra pennies, the box now tells us that there's an exclusive comic. On the side we can see that this Batman comes from an Injustice 2 comic. On the bottom we see a bunch of legal, and for those who want it, here's the barcode. On the back we get a look at that exclusive comic, along with a very boring picture of Batman. He looks like a kid in a Halloween costume. I actually do really like these boxes, and for packaging, I'm giving Page Punchers 1 whole point. Moving on to presentation, at the top of his scalp, Batman stands at 7 inches, but to the top of his ears, he stands at 7 1/4. From the top, and I feel like I'm looking at an action figure from an unreleased Batman movie. The cowl absolutely feels like a combination of Val Kilmer's and Christian Bale's, and the fact that we can see his eyes underneath surrounded by black makeup really sells it. Also, extra points to McFarlane for making him look ahead. The face is very realistic and nicely painted, and this general area really evokes Christian Bale's suit from The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. The groove in the chest armor, however, reminds me of Batman Returns. Similar to the Arkham Knight armor, and he has some shoulder pauldrons. They're nice and soft and won't get in the way of articulation. These elbows are giving me flashbacks to the Hush Batman, but thanks to this groove in the armor, and it does look like that's how it's supposed to be. And then moving down the arm, the fins remind me of Christian Bale's suit as well. One of the things that throws me off a bit is the diaphragm joint. In the game, the abdominal armor is a plate that goes over the bodysuit, but here, to accommodate the posability, it tucks underneath the cloth. One of the things I particularly love is the belt. It reminds me a lot of this belt from Crusader Batman. That was from the Legends of Batman series by Kenner, and that design was taken from a Batman Judge Dredd comic. Deep down, I really want to believe this was on purpose. Traveling down the legs, and we can see some different wrinkles and textures and thigh armor. More of that great texturing on the cape, by the way. And then moving all the way down, we have the knee pads and boots. Again, not just a lot of great sculpted detail, but also a lot of painted detail as well. Leastways, it feels like there's more painted detail than usual. Flipping up the cape, and here he is from the back. Regardless of how you feel about the game or this design, the figure has been impeccably well sculpted and painted. For presentation, I'm giving this Batman 1 whole point. From the top, and as usual, his head's in a dumbbell joint. He can look up this far, which is pretty good, and he can really bury the chin. Pretty decent tilt, and all the way around. Moving on down to Batman has swivel hinge shoulders that raise up 90 degrees. Again, the shoulder pauldrons don't get in the way. Forward and back with the rotator cuff. Bicep swivel, double jointed elbows, and the new and improved McFarlane wrist balls. They can swivel and hinge. Shifting the torso, and as usual, this is the figure's greatest area of opportunity. Using both his diaphragm joint and dumbbell waist, you can arch back this far, but he can't really hunch forward whatsoever. Fortunately, he can tilt and twist. Below the utility belt, and Batman has a typical McFarlane hips. They can kick forward this far and split this far. Not as much twist at the hip, but it's there. And then moving down, Batman has very crunchy double jointed knees, toe articulation, and the new and improved McFarlane ankle ball that can swivel, hinge, and pivot. With the exception of the torso, which is pretty much every DC Multiverse figure's Achilles heel, the articulation on this figure is perfect. For posability, I'm giving Injustice 2 Batman 1 whole point. Moving on to playability, and Batman has this nicely wrapped comic book trading card and figure stand set. The trading card, of course, is just the cover of the comic book, and will be for the entire series. If you're curious what the back says, though, here you go. This cover artwork is from Doug Braithwaite, but the interior flap promises a variant cover, which I'm kind of curious to see how that's going to be executed. The comic was written by Tim Seeley and illustrated by Jose Luis and Daniel HDR. As before, the artwork is very nice. Wouldn't mind seeing a figure of this Superman. It also features a lot more Injustice characters than appear in the wave, so I'm kind of curious what their plans are moving forward. As for the figure stand, it's just our usual tried and true one. Otherwise, all Batman comes with are a couple of oversized batarangs, which again do look like something that came out of a Joel Schumacher movie. He doesn't have a particularly tight grip on them, but he can hold them like so. But playability is more than just accessories, it's also about how well your figure plays with others. Starting off with some other Page Punchers, and I'll be saving Batman for later, but here we have Black Adam. Atom, John Constantine, and Superman. For some other Superman figures, and here we have the DC Direct Through the Years box set, DC Essentials. Since this Batman is so cinematic, here we have Christopher Reeve, the DC Multiverse Action Comics 1000, and the all-new gold label Hush. And there you go. Here we have the new 52 Wonder Woman from DC Collectibles, and this one designed by Todd McFarlane. Here we have the DC Essentials and DC Multiverse versions of The Flash, Aquaman, and Green Lantern. By now, I think it's becoming abundantly clear that this Batman is simply too short. If that wasn't clear, here he is with Injustice 2 Green Arrow. I know they're reissuing him with new legs for Page Punchers, and I'm going to be very curious to see if those new legs are shorter. As for Dr. Fate, he isn't too bad. We're also getting a new Page Punchers version of him, and for the last Injustice 2 figure in my collection so far, here we have Gorilla Grodd. Moving over to the Bat family, and here we have Damian from Mattel and McFarlane. Here we have Mattel and McFarlane versions of Tim Drake. Either combination of these looks pretty good. Here we have DC Designer Series and DC Essentials versions of Nightwing. I really need to get a McFarlane one. Here we have DC Essentials and DC Multiverse versions of Red Hood. And here we have DC Essentials and DC Multiverse versions of Batgirl. Lastly, here he is with Alfred. That said, since he does remind me of a live-action Batman, here he is with Michael Gough. Gough? Go? I don't know. Veering off into some villains, and since this is a video game Batman, here we have the Arkham Asylum Joker, and also the Joker from Mortal Kombat 11. Honestly, these two look really good together. Not so good that I won't bring out my Kit Bash, of course. But again, on the subject of video games, here we have the Arkham Knight Scarecrow, Arkham Origins Deathstroke. These two look ready for an incredible movie, and the Mattel Arkham City Two-Face. Here we have the DC Designer Series Riddler, as well as the DC Designer Series Catwoman. Here's the DC Direct Secret Files Poison Ivy, the DC Essentials Harley Quinn, the Arkham City Harley Quinn by NECA, the Arkham City Harley Quinn by Mattel, and the Arkham Asylum Harley Quinn from DC Direct. Here we have the DC Multiverse Hush, but for some big scale baddies, and here we have Man-Bat, Clayface, and Bane. For a roll to scale comparison, here's Batman with Pizza Spidey and the Spectacular Spider-Man, and as always, here he is with Stealth Iron Man. This of course brings us to head swaps, and because this cowl is gray, it goes without saying that most of them would need to be repainted. Here we have the Rebirth version from DC Essentials. I mainly just brought him out for a size comparison. Moving over to McFarlane, and here we have Detective Comics 1000. I'm not the biggest fan of this head, but with a little paint I don't think it would be too bad. Leastways, the proportions are pretty good. Usually I'm of the mind that any head improves this figure, but even I've got to admit this one doesn't quite work. Next up, and here we have Flashpoint. It's definitely an interesting look, but I do feel like the body's a bit too comic booky and that the head's a bit too small. Other way around definitely looks better, but I do think that the head might be just a skosh too big. The heads aren't compatible, but for a size comparison, here we have the Battle Damage version. Similarly, we can't swap these, but here he is with 3 Jokers, and here he is with my custom Hush. Here we have DC Rebirth. As someone who's complained about this head before, this might be my favorite so far. Thanks to the smaller size, the proportions are absolutely spot on. Honestly, this is a pretty interesting look too. It would have to be painted, of course, but there might be something there. For one that I'm very curious about, here we have Batfleck. The neck is unfortunately a bit too wide and kind of draws attention to itself, but when you back out, you barely notice. Conversely, this doesn't look too bad. The proportions are decent, and it does really look like it could be a live-action Batman. And for another live-action one that I'm very curious about, here we have Battinson. As I expected, I really like this. The head is a bit small, but it does make the body look that much broader. The other way around, unfortunately, has the opposite effect. The larger head creates the illusion of a much smaller body. For my favorite Batman to do head swaps, and here we have Future State. Once again, we have a winner. The proportions are slightly off, but I think it still looks pretty good. And again, as always, the other way around looks great too. And with so many skins in the game, I'm sure you could find some custom to use it for. Next up, and here we have Dark Detective. Shave off the ears, and this wouldn't be half bad. It's already a more cinematic looking head sculpt, so I think it really works. In general, this is far from my favorite Batman, but I do think this head might be an improvement. Tell me what you think in the comments. Here we have the Crime Syndicate Owlman. If you were looking to make an even more cinematic Owlman, I think this would be a great match, or even just Night Owl from Watchmen. And if you wanted to turn Owlman into Batman, this works too. The grays, of course, are just a little bit off. And lastly, here we have Page Punchers. Out of all the other swaps we've done, Rebirth is still my favorite, but this this one comes a close second. It also really draws attention to how much my brain feels like the cowl should be black. That said, throw on some black paint and I really like this combo. This already looks like a live-action Batman, so in my books it's a match made in heaven. While this Batman scales great with your DC Direct collection, it's way too small for your other McFarlane figures, most especially the other figures from Injustice 2. For playability, I'm giving Batman half a point. This leaves us with nothing left to discuss but the price. Like all Page Punchers figures, Batman retails for $24.99. That extra $5 is for the comic book, which you'll be getting 4 copies of if you collect the entire wave. As nice as this figure looks, with nothing else in the box but 2 of the same Batarang, I just don't feel like the value's there. For price, I'm giving this Batman half a point for a grand total of 4 out of 5. For another Page Punchers Batman, click here, or for another head swap video, click here. Where does this Batman costume rank for you? Sound off in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again real soon, but until then, play nice and have fun.